Undercover owner gets chicken nuggets, spots cryptic note inside box, and immediately confronts staff. The fluorescent lights of store number 47 buzzed overhead like angry wasps as Ethan Price pulled his baseball cap lower over his eyes. He'd built an empire of 73 fast food restaurants across the country, but standing in line at this particular location made his stomach turn, and not from hunger. The numbers didn't lie. Store number 47 had gone from top performer to bottom feeder in just 8 months. Customer complaints had tripled. Employee turnover was astronomical. Something was rotting here, and Ethan needed to see it with his own eyes. "Next!" barked a voice from behind the counter. Ethan shuffled forward, keeping his head down. The girl at the register couldn't have been older than 19. Her name tag read Sarah, in cheerful red letters, but there was nothing cheerful about the dark circles under her eyes or the way her hands trembled as she punched buttons on the screen. "Welcome to Chicken Express. What can I get you?" Her voice was flat, rehearsed, lifeless. "Just a small nugget meal, please. Water to drink. That'll be $647. Ethan handed her a $10 bill and watched her work. She moved like someone walking through a nightmare, mechanical, distant, afraid. When she gave him his change, he noticed the raw, red skin on her knuckles, like she'd been scrubbing floors until they bled. "Your order will be ready in a moment," she whispered, then retreated to the back before he could say thank you. The dining area was nearly empty despite it being lunchtime. A mother with 2 small children occupied one booth, and an elderly man sat alone near the window, slowly chewing a burger. The walls were decorated with bright posters advertising fresh food, happy staff, community first. The company values Ethan had written himself 5 years ago. Now they felt like lies. "Order 42. Ethan collected his tray from a different employee, a middle-aged man whose name tag identified him as Marcus. The man's left eye was swollen, a purple bruise spreading across his cheekbone. "Thanks," Ethan said, trying to catch his eye. "Hey, are you okay? That looks..." Walked into a door. Marcus turned away immediately. "Enjoy your meal." Ethan carried his tray to a corner booth where he could observe the entire restaurant. He opened the nugget box, reaching for the small cup of barbecue sauce, when something white caught his attention. A piece of paper, folded into a tight square, sat wedged between 2 nuggets. His heart began to pound. This wasn't a receipt or a promotional coupon. The paper was worn, like it had been handled many times, folded and unfolded by nervous fingers. Ethan glanced around. Nobody was watching him. He carefully extracted the paper and smoothed it open on the table. The handwriting was shaky, desperate, written in blue pen that had bled through in places where the writer had pressed too hard. "Please help us. They watch everything. Can't leave. Can't talk. If you care at all, do something. We're trapped." Ethan's blood ran cold. He read it again. Then a third time. This wasn't a prank. The desperation in those words was real, tangible. Someone had risked everything to slip this note into a random customer's food, gambling that whoever found it might actually care enough to act. He stood abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the tile floor. The mother with the children looked up, startled. Ethan strode to the counter where a tall man with slicked back hair and a manager's badge was reviewing something on a tablet. His name tag read, "Carl, Assistant Manager. I need to speak with you," Ethan said, his voice tight with controlled anger. Carl didn't look up. "If you have a complaint, there's a number on your receipt. I said I need to speak with you. Now." Something in Ethan's tone made Carl finally raise his eyes. He assessed Ethan with the cold, calculating gaze of a man used to intimidating people into submission. "Sir, I'm very busy. If your food wasn't satisfactory..." Ethan slapped the note onto the counter between them. Carl's face went white. Then red. Then white again. "Where did you get that?" His voice dropped to a deadly whisper. "It was in my food. Want to explain what's going on here?" Carl's jaw clenched. He snatched the note, crumpled it in his fist, and forced a smile that looked more like a snarl. "That's a prank, sir. Some employees think they're funny. I'll deal with it. A prank? Ethan leaned forward. This says people are trapped. That sounds like a pretty serious prank. It's nothing. Carl's eyes darted toward the kitchen, then back. Teenage drama. You know how kids are these days, always trying to get attention, make trouble. I apologize for any concern it caused. Your meal is on the house. He started to turn away, but Ethan grabbed his arm. I'm not leaving until I talk to your staff. Carl jerked his arm free, and for just a moment, Ethan saw something dangerous flash in his eyes, something violent and barely contained. Sir, you need to leave. Now. Or what? Or I'll call the police and have you removed for harassment. They stared at each other. Ethan wanted to reveal himself right then, to throw off his disguise and watch this man crumble. But something stopped him. If he showed his hand too early, whoever wrote that note might suffer for it. He needed more information first. Fine, Ethan said quietly. But I'm filing a complaint with corporate. This isn't over. Carl smiled, a real smile this time, full of confidence and contempt. File whatever you want, buddy. Corporate doesn't care about one random note. They care about numbers, and my numbers are excellent. Ethan walked toward the exit, but paused at the door. He turned back and saw Sarah standing near the fryer, partially hidden behind a support beam. Her eyes were locked on him, wide and desperate and filled with tears. She mouthed two words. Please! Help! Then Carl barked her name, and she flinched like she'd been struck, disappearing back into the kitchen. Ethan pushed through the door into the parking lot, his mind racing. He sat in his car for a long moment, staring at the restaurant through the windshield. Someone in there was crying for help. Multiple people, based on the note's use of us and we're. And Carl, that smug, dangerous man, was at the center of it. Ethan pulled out his phone and opened his private contact list. He scrolled to Janet Kim, head of HR. But he hesitated before calling. If he went through official channels now, Carl would know something was wrong. He'd cover his tracks, intimidate witnesses, maybe even hurt whoever wrote that note. No. Ethan needed evidence. Real evidence. He needed to go deeper undercover. He started his car and drove away from store number 47, but his eyes kept drifting to the rearview mirror, watching the building shrink in the distance. We're trapped, the note had said. Not for long, Ethan thought. Not for long. Ethan circled the block twice before parking his car in a strip mall across the street. He couldn't leave. Not yet. Not with Sarah's terrified face burned into his memory. He pulled up the company database on his phone and searched for store number 47's employee records. 15 people currently employed. In the past 8 months, 23 had quit or been fired. That was a turnover rate of over 150%, catastrophic by any measure. His phone buzzed. A text from his CFO. Board meeting in 20 minutes. Where are you? Ethan typed back. Emergency. Reschedule. He watched the restaurant entrance. At 2:47 p.m., Carl emerged, climbed into a black BMW, and drove away. The lunch rush was over. This might be his only chance. Ethan crossed the street and pushed through the doors again. The dining room was empty now except for Marcus, who was wiping down tables with mechanical precision. The moment he saw Ethan, he froze. You came back, Marcus whispered, his eyes darting toward the security camera in the corner. You shouldn't have. I need to talk to someone. Anyone. About that note. Marcus's jaw tightened. He continued wiping the same spot on the table over and over. Don't know what you're talking about. Marcus, I saw your bruise. I saw how scared Sarah looked. Whatever's happening here. Sir, I need you to leave. Marcus's voice cracked. Please. Just. Forget what you saw. A door swung open in the back, and Sarah emerged carrying a mop bucket. When she saw Ethan, she nearly dropped it. Water sloshed over the sides. You, she breathed. I want to help, Ethan said. The note said you're trapped. Tell me what's going on. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She set the bucket down and took a step toward him, then stopped, her gaze shifting to something behind Ethan. He turned. 2 more employees had emerged from the kitchen. A young man, maybe 20, with acne scars and a nervous twitch. And an older woman, possibly in her 50s, with graying hair pulled back in a tight bun. They all stared at Ethan like he was a bomb about to explode. "Is there somewhere private we can talk?" Ethan asked. "Please. I'm not a cop, I'm not inspecting anything. I'm just someone who found a note and wants to understand." The older woman shook her head violently. "No. No, no, no." Her accent was thick, Eastern European, maybe Romanian. "You go. You go now. I can report this to." "Report nothing." She stepped forward, her face contorted with fear and anger. "You report, we all get fired. You understand? All of us. Then what? Where we go? We have children. Rent. You help? You give us jobs?" Ethan felt the words like a punch to the gut. "What has Carl done to make you this afraid?" Nobody answered. "Please," Sarah finally said, her voice barely audible. "He'll know you were here. The cameras record everything. When he watches the footage tonight and sees you came back." She wrapped her arms around herself. "He'll know someone talked." "What will he do?" Ethan demanded. The young man with the acne scars spoke for the first time. "Last month, Tommy tried to file a complaint with corporate. Used the computer in the office during his break." His voice shook. "Carl found out. Deleted the email. Then he made Tommy work a double shift, alone, cleaning the grease traps and the walk-in freezer. Tommy passed out from the fumes. Woke up in the freezer. Carl said if he ever tried to contact corporate again, he'd make sure Tommy's little sister, she works here too, got hurt. A fryer accident, maybe." "Jesus Christ," Ethan whispered. "Tommy quit the next day," Sarah added. "But his sister still works here. She has to. Single mom, 3 kids. Marcus had stopped pretending to clean. He stood rigid, staring at the floor. "Carl controls everything. Schedules, paychecks, time cards. If you complain, your hours disappear. If you push harder, you get fired, but not officially. He just schedules you for 0 hours until you quit. No unemployment benefits that way." "And if you try to report him?" Ethan asked. "The regional manager is his cousin," the older woman said bitterly. "Any complaint we make, it goes to Carl first. He deletes it. Makes it disappear. We are invisible." Sarah wiped her eyes roughly. "I wrote that note 3 weeks ago. I've been putting it in random orders ever since, hoping someone would care. You're the first person who came back." The weight of that statement settled over the room like a shroud. How many people had found her desperate plea and simply thrown it away? How many had read it, shrugged, and gone on with their lives? "I need proof," Ethan said. "Documentation. Video. Something concrete I can use." "Use for what?" Marcus asked. "You gonna call the news? They won't care. 1 bad manager in 1 restaurant? That's not a story. What if I told you I could get this to someone who would care? Someone who could actually fix this?" Sarah laughed, a broken, hollow sound. "Like who? The CEO?" Her voice dripped with sarcasm. "Yeah, I'm sure Ethan Price is just waiting by his phone for my call." Ethan almost revealed himself right there. Almost. But something held him back. These people had been betrayed too many times. They needed more than promises. They needed action. "Meet me," he said to Sarah. "Away from here. Somewhere Carl can't see. He'll know. Tomorrow morning. The coffee shop across the street. 7 a.m., before your shift." Sarah hesitated, glancing at the others. Marcus gave a tiny nod. The older woman looked away. "Okay," Sarah whispered. "But if he finds out." "He won't. I promise." Ethan turned to leave, but Sarah's voice stopped him. "Why do you care? You don't even know us." Ethan looked back at her, This scared teenager who'd been brave enough to ask for help when no one else would. Because someone should, he said simply. Then he walked out, leaving behind a room full of people who'd forgotten what hope felt like. But as the door closed behind him, Ethan heard it, the smallest, quietest sound. Someone was crying. Ethan didn't sleep that night. He sat in his home office, the glow of 3 monitors casting blue light across his face. On one screen, employee records scrolled endlessly. On another, financial reports from store number 47. On the third, a video call window waiting to connect. At 11:47 p.m., Janet Kim's face appeared on the screen. His head of HR looked exhausted, her hair in a messy bun, glasses slightly crooked. This better be important, Ethan. I was actually sleeping for once. Pull every complaint filed from store number 47 in the last year, Ethan said without preamble. Every single one. Employee complaints, customer complaints, safety reports. Everything. Janet's eyes sharpened. She reached for something off-screen, probably her laptop. What's going on? Just pull them. Now. I'll wait. The sound of typing filled the silence. Ethan drummed his fingers on his desk, watching the seconds tick by on his watch. Each one felt like an eternity. That's strange, Janet said after 3 minutes. What? There are only 2 complaints on file for store number 47 in the past 12 months. One about cold fries, one about a wrong order. Both marked resolved by the regional manager. Ethan's blood turned to ice. 2? That's impossible. Check the raw data. Before it went through regional management. More typing. Janet's frown deepened. Ethan, I'm looking at the source database. There's nothing else here. Either that store is running perfectly, or someone's deleting complaints before they reach us. Ethan stood pacing. Who has access to delete from the employee complaint system? Regional managers and above. But there are supposed to be automatic backups that. Janet stopped. Her face went pale. Oh no. What? The backup logs for store number 47's region. They've been manually disabled. 6 months ago. By who? Janet's fingers flew across her keyboard. Richard Voss. Regional manager for District 7. He submitted a ticket claiming the backups were creating system errors. IT approved it without escalation. Richard Voss. Ethan pulled up the organizational chart on his second monitor. Richard had been with the company for 4 years, overseeing 12 locations. Performance reviews adequate. Nothing exceptional, nothing terrible. Completely invisible. Janet, I need security footage from store number 47. Last 2 weeks. All of it. That's going to be massive. Days of footage. I don't care. Send it to my secure server. And Janet? Don't tell anyone about this. Not yet. She hesitated. Ethan, if there's something illegal happening, I need proof first. Real proof. Just trust me. After she disconnected, Ethan pulled up Richard Voss's employment file. Standard background check, clean criminal record, 3 references from previous food service management positions. But something caught Ethan's eye in the personal information section. Emergency contact, Carl Voss. Brother. Son of a bitch, Ethan whispered. His phone buzzed with an alert. The security footage was uploading, 217 gigabytes of data. It would take hours to download. Ethan set it to fast-forward mode and started watching at 4x speed. The first few days showed normal operations. Employees working, customers coming and going, the usual rhythm of a fast food restaurant. But then Ethan noticed patterns. Every night after closing, the lights would go off at 10 p.m., official closing time. But on the grainy night vision footage, he could see figures still moving inside. Employees mopping, cleaning, restocking. The timestamps showed them working until midnight, sometimes later. Ethan slowed the footage to normal speed and watched one night in particular. Carl stood by the door, arms crossed, as Sarah scrubbed the same section of floor 3 times. When she tried to leave, Carl pointed back at the floor. she scrubbed again. No one clocked in during these hours. No overtime was being recorded. Ethan's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. He switched to daytime footage from 3 days ago. A young woman, Tommy's sister based on the description, was working the fryer. Her name tag read Elena. Carl approached her, spoke words Ethan couldn't hear. Elena's face crumpled. She nodded quickly, frantically, backing away from him. Carl smiled and walked away. Ethan zoomed in on Elena's face. She was crying silently, tears streaming down her cheeks as she dropped frozen nuggets into boiling oil with shaking hands. The footage continued. Marcus arriving for his shift with a black eye. The older Romanian woman, her name tag identified her as Ioana, being called into the office. She emerged 20 minutes later looking devastated. And through it all, Carl moved like a predator through his territory, always watching, always controlling. Ethan checked the employee time cards against the footage. The discrepancies were staggering. Employees working 50, 60 hours a week but only being paid for 30. Overtime systematically erased. Break times deleted. This wasn't just bad management. This was theft. Exploitation. Abuse. Ethan opened his email and started composing a message to the company's legal team, then stopped. Sarah's words echoed in his mind. The regional manager is his cousin. Brother, actually. Which meant Richard would see any official complaint coming. He'd warned Carl. They'd destroy evidence, intimidate witnesses, maybe even hurt someone to keep them quiet. Ethan needed a different approach. He needed to catch Carl in the act. At 3:27 a.m., Ethan made a decision. He pulled up a contact in his phone, Derek Chin, a private investigator he'd used once before when acquiring a competitor. Derek. I need surveillance equipment. Professional grade. And I need you to teach me how to use it. Ethan? Man, it's 3 in the morning. Can you do it or not? A pause. Yeah, I can do it. When? Today. Before noon. What are you getting into? Ethan looked at his monitors, at the frozen image of Sarah's tearful face, at the records of stolen wages and violated rights. Something I should have been paying attention to all along, he said quietly. He had 6 hours before his meeting with Sarah. 6 hours to become someone who could bring down an empire of cruelty built inside his own company. The download progress bar on his screen hit 100%. Ethan cracked his knuckles and got to work. The surveillance equipment sat in Ethan's car like a covert operative's toolkit. A pen camera, a button camera disguised as part of a jacket, and a smartphone app that could record conversations from across a room. Derek had given him a 30-minute crash course that morning, ending with one piece of advice. Don't get caught. People like this get dangerous when cornered. Now, at 8:47 p.m., Ethan sat in the store number 47 parking lot wearing a bright orange delivery driver vest he'd bought from a uniform shop. A magnetic sign reading, "Quick Bite Delivery," was stuck to his car door. The disguise was thin, but it would work. Delivery drivers were invisible to most people. His meeting with Sarah that morning had been devastating. She'd arrived at the coffee shop 20 minutes early, looking over her shoulder every few seconds like a hunted animal. Over tea she couldn't drink because her hands shook too much. She told him everything. Carl had started as assistant manager 10 months ago. At first, things seemed normal. But gradually, the changes came. Longer shifts. Disappearing break times. Employees called in on days off with threats of termination if they refused. Then came the wage theft, hours deleted from time cards, overtime that vanished into thin air. My mom works night cleaning jobs, Sarah had whispered. She's undocumented. Carl found out somehow. Now he holds it over me. If I complain, he reports her to immigration. I have a little brother. He's only 7. What happens to him if Mom gets deported? The worst part? Carl had turned the employees against each other. Anyone who seemed friendly with a coworker got separated, their shifts changed. He encouraged people to report on each other, rewarding snitches with better schedules. The workplace had become a prison of mutual suspicion. "Why hasn't anyone gone to the police?" Ethan had asked. Sarah's laugh was bitter. "And say what? My boss is mean and doesn't pay me correctly? Half of us have immigration issues, not just me. Joanna's visa expired. Marcus has a record from 10 years ago. Carl finds everyone's weakness and squeezes." Now, watching the restaurant through his windshield, Ethan checked the button camera hidden in his jacket. A tiny red light blinked once, recording. The closed sign had been up for 47 minutes. But through the windows, Ethan could see movement inside. Shadows crossing back and forth. The lights were off except for the emergency exit signs, casting everything in an eerie red glow. Ethan grabbed an empty delivery bag from his passenger seat and walked toward the restaurant. He tried the front door, locked. But the side entrance where employees took smoke breaks was slightly ajar. He slipped inside. The smell hit him first, industrial cleaner so strong it burned his nostrils. He could hear voices from the kitchen. Angry voices. "I said scrub it again!" Carl's voice echoed off the tile walls. "You think that's clean? That's disgusting. I've scrubbed it 3 times. Sarah's voice, small and desperate. "Then scrub it a 4th time. You don't leave until it's perfect." Ethan crept closer, staying in the shadows of the dining area. Through the kitchen doorway, he could see Sarah on her hands and knees scrubbing the floor with a brush. Her forearms were red and raw. Carl stood over her, arms crossed, watching with cold satisfaction. Marcus was at the sink, washing dishes that had already been washed. His movements were mechanical, exhausted. Ethan's hidden camera captured everything. "Please," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "It's almost 9:30. I have school tomorrow. I need to study for. You need to do what I tell you." Carl's voice dropped to something dangerous. "Or maybe I make a phone call to IC. How would you like that? Your mom picked up at her night job? Your little brother put in foster care while they process her deportation?" Sarah's shoulders shook. She scrubbed harder, her tears falling onto the wet floor. "That's what I thought." Carl pulled out his phone, checking something. "You know what, Sarah? I don't think you're taking this seriously enough." He walked to the fryer and turned it on. The oil began to heat with a low rumble. "What are you doing?" Sarah's voice rose in panic. "Teaching you a lesson about respect." Carl smiled, a predator's smile. "You're going to clean out the fryer. Tonight. While it's still warm. Not hot enough to burn, of course. I'm not a monster. But warm enough that you'll remember this next time you think about complaining. That's against every safety protocol. Are you refusing a manager's direct order?" Sarah looked at Marcus, desperate for help. Marcus stared at the dishes, his jaw clenched, saying nothing. He'd learned long ago that helping others only made things worse for everyone. Sarah's voice failed her. Ethan stepped out of the shadows. "That's enough." 3 heads whipped toward him. Carl's face went from shock to fury in a heartbeat. "What the hell are you doing in my restaurant?" He moved toward Ethan with aggressive strides. "This is breaking and entering. I'm calling the cops." "Go ahead," Ethan said calmly, his hidden camera recording every word. "Call them. I'd love to explain why you're forcing minors to work unpaid hours and ordering them to perform dangerous tasks that violate OSHA regulations." Carl stopped. His eyes narrowed, calculating. "You're that guy from yesterday. The one with the note." "That's right. I don't know what you think you saw, but these employees volunteered to stay late for extra cleaning." "Right, Sarah?" Sarah stared at the floor, trembling. "Look at me when I'm talking to you." Carl barked. "Don't," Ethan said sharply. "Don't say another word to her." Carl's laugh was ugly. "Who the hell do you think you are? Some hero? You're nobody. You're going to leave my restaurant right now or what?" Ethan took a step forward. "You'll threaten me too? Add me to your list? I'll have you arrested." "For what?" "I'm a delivery driver who walked through an open door." "But you," Ethan gestured to Sarah, still on her knees. You're committing labor violations, wage theft, and harassment. So please call the police. Let's see who they're more interested in." For a long moment, Carl just stared at him. Then his expression changed, shifted into something almost amused. "You think you're the first person to try to play hero? Corporate doesn't care. The regional manager doesn't care. Nobody cares about these people," he said. "These people," like the words tasted bitter. "They're disposable. Replaceable. And if you try to make trouble, you'll find out just how quickly they all deny everything to keep their jobs." He turned to Sarah. Tell him you're here voluntarily." Sarah's whole body shook. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Ethan's heart broke watching her try to choose between truth and survival. "It's okay," he said gently. "You don't have to say anything." Then Ethan reached up and removed his baseball cap. He pulled off the fake glasses Derek had given him. He stood up straighter, letting his full height and presence fill the room. "My name is Ethan Price," he said clearly. "I'm the founder and owner of this company." "And Carl?" Carl's face had gone from red to white to a sickly gray. "You're fired." The silence that followed was deafening. Carl's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. Sarah's head snapped up, her eyes wide with disbelief. Marcus dropped the plate he was holding. It shattered against the floor, the sound echoing through the kitchen like a gunshot. You're lying," Carl finally stammered. "Ethan Price doesn't. He doesn't do store visits. He doesn't." Ethan pulled out his phone and held up his driver's license on the screen. His face, his name, his title as CEO clearly visible on the company directory. Carl took a stumbling step backward. "Sarah, Marcus, go home," Ethan said quietly, never taking his eyes off Carl. "Right now. Clock out with your actual hours. I'll be reviewing every time card personally. You can't just..." Carl started. "I can. I will. And if you say one more word, I'm calling the police myself." Ethan's voice was ice. "How many labor laws do you think you've broken tonight alone? Should we count them?" Sarah scrambled to her feet, grabbing her backpack from a hook. Marcus was already moving toward the door. But Sarah paused, looking back at Ethan with something like hope flickering in her eyes. "Is this real?" she whispered. "It's real. You're safe now. I promise." She ran. Ethan waited until he heard the back door close before turning his full attention to Carl. "My lawyers will be in touch. You have until tomorrow morning to gather your personal belongings. If you set foot in any of my restaurants again, I'll have you arrested for trespassing. Now get out." Carl's shock was transforming into rage. His hands clenched into fists. "You don't understand what you're doing. Richard will. Your brother is suspended as of this moment. I'll be dealing with him tomorrow. You're making a mistake. These people are lying to you. They're lazy, they're entitled, they. Out. Now." Something in Ethan's expression must have convinced Carl that pushing further would be dangerous. He grabbed his jacket and stormed toward the exit, but turned back at the door. "They'll never testify against me," he said, his voice dripping with venom. "They're too scared. And without proof, without witnesses, you have nothing." Then he was gone. Ethan stood alone in the empty restaurant, his hands shaking with suppressed fury. The button camera had captured everything, but Carl was right about one thing: he needed witness testimony. He needed someone brave enough to go on record. He pulled out his phone and texted Sarah. "Coffee shop tomorrow. 7 a.m. Please come. I need your help to make sure he never does this to anyone again." The response came 2 minutes later, "Okay." Sarah was already there when Ethan arrived the next morning, sitting at the same corner table as before. But this time, she wasn't alone. Marcus sat beside her, and Ioana was there too, her weathered hands wrapped around a cup of tea. Ethan ordered coffee and joined them. "You came back," Sarah said. There was wonder in her voice, like she still couldn't quite believe it. "I told you I would. People say a lot of things," Marcus spoke quietly. "They don't usually mean them. Ethan set a small recording device on the table. I need to hear everything. All of it. I have video footage, I have time card discrepancies, but I need your testimonies to build a case that ensures Carl never works in food service again. That Richard faces consequences. That this never happens at any of my stores again. Sarah looked at the other two. Some silent conversation passed between them. If we talk, Joanna said slowly, her accent thick with emotion, and nothing happens. If Carl comes back, or Richard protects him, we lose everything. You understand? I have 2 children. My visa, it expires in 3 months. I'm trying to renew, but if I lose this job, you won't lose your jobs. Any of you. I'm guaranteeing that personally. Ethan leaned forward. And I'm hiring an immigration attorney to help with your visa situation. Pro bono. No strings attached. Joanna's eyes filled with tears. Why? Marcus asked. Why do you care this much? You're a billionaire. You could have just fired Carl and walked away. Ethan thought about how to answer that. He could tell them about corporate responsibility, about values and ethics. But the truth was simpler. Because I built this company on a promise, he said finally. That we'd treat people with dignity. That we'd be different from every other fast food chain that chews up workers and spits them out. And I failed you. All of you. I got so focused on expansion, on profits, on board meetings and stock prices that I stopped paying attention to what was actually happening in my own restaurants. He looked at each of them in turn. I can't undo what Carl did. But I can make sure it never happens again. I can make sure you're protected. And I can make sure every dollar he stole from you gets paid back with interest. Sarah reached into her backpack and pulled out a worn notebook. She slid it across the table. I kept records, she said. Every unpaid hour. Every threat. Every time he made someone work sick, or deleted someone's overtime, or... Her voice broke. Or made Elena stick her hands in the hot fryer oil as punishment. Ethan opened the notebook. Pages and pages of meticulous notes, dated and detailed. Times, names, incidents. Sarah had documented everything. This is... Ethan looked up at her. This is extraordinary. I didn't know if anyone would ever see it. But I had to write it down. I had to remember that I wasn't crazy, that this wasn't normal. Marcus pulled out his phone. I have recordings. From 2 weeks ago. Carl doesn't know, but I recorded him threatening to report Joanna to immigration if she didn't work a double shift even though she was sick. Joanna nodded slowly. I will testify. For my children. So they grow up knowing their mother was brave enough to tell the truth. For the next hour they talked. They told Ethan everything. The systematic abuse, the psychological warfare, the way Carl had created a culture of fear so complete that employees were afraid to even make eye contact with each other. How he'd forced Tommy to work in dangerous conditions. How he'd threatened Elena's children. How he'd stolen thousands of dollars in wages from people who could least afford to lose them. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper when she described the worst of it. 2 months ago, a girl named Jessica worked here. She was 17. Carl kept touching her. Her shoulder, her back. Standing too close. She tried to report it through the employee hotline. Sarah's hands trembled. Richard called Carl directly. Told him about the complaint. Carl fired Jessica the next day for performance issues. She was too scared to fight it. Ethan's blood turned to ice. Do you know where Jessica is now? She moved to another state. Couldn't handle being in the same town. I'll find her. She deserves justice too. When they finally finished, Ethan turned off the recorder. He looked at these 3 people who'd survived something that should never have happened in the first place. Thank you, he said. You're incredibly brave. Sarah shook her head. We're not brave. We're just tired of being scared. That's the same thing, Ethan said gently. Ethan chose Thursday morning for the confrontation. Peak breakfast rush. Maximum witnesses. He'd spent the previous 2 days building an airtight case with his legal team. Employee testimonies, video footage, wage theft calculations totaling over $47,000 across 15 employees. Richard Voss had been placed on immediate leave when HR discovered he deleted 127 complaint emails over 6 months. The regional manager was already lawyering up. But Carl didn't know any of this yet. Ethan had made sure of it. Now, at 8:47 a.m., store number 47 was packed. The line stretched to the door, morning commuters grabbing breakfast, parents with kids, construction workers on break. Sarah was at the register, moving through orders with mechanical efficiency. She didn't know Ethan was coming. He wanted everything to appear normal. Carl stood behind the counter, arms crossed, surveying his domain like a king watching his subjects. He was smiling. Ethan walked in wearing a business suit, no disguise this time. His lawyer, Patricia Huang, followed 2 steps behind, carrying a briefcase. Behind her, a security officer Ethan had hired privately. The moment Carl saw him, his smile faltered. Ethan walked directly to the counter, cutting past the line. Several customers grumbled, but he ignored them. Carl, we need to talk. Now. Carl's face hardened. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to wait in line like everyone. No, Ethan's voice cut through the restaurant chatter like a knife. You're going to come with me to the office. Right now. Or we can have this conversation right here in front of your customers. I don't know who you think you are. Yes, you do. Ethan didn't raise his voice, but something in his tone made several customers stop and turn. You know exactly who I am. You've known since Tuesday night. Carl's jaw clenched. He glanced at the growing crowd of onlookers, then back at Ethan. Calculation flickered behind his eyes. Fine. Office. 5 minutes, he turned to Sarah. Keep the line moving. No, Ethan said. We talk now. Here. This is inappropriate. What's inappropriate is stealing wages from your employees. What's inappropriate is forcing minors to work illegal hours. What's inappropriate is sexual harassment, labor violations, and witness intimidation. The restaurant went dead silent. Every customer was watching now. Someone in the back had their phone out, recording. Carl's face flushed red. You need to leave before I call the police. Go ahead. Ethan pulled out his phone and set it on the counter, speaker mode activated. I have Detective Sarah Chen from the Labor Standards Division on standby. Should I conference her in? It was a bluff, sort of. The detective was real, but she wasn't on standby. But Carl didn't know that. You're insane, Carl hissed. These employees will tell you I've done nothing wrong. I run a tight ship, but everything is by the book. Really? Ethan turned to Sarah. She stood frozen behind the register, her face pale. Sarah, has Carl ever made you work without pay? Sarah's eyes darted between Ethan and Carl. Her mouth opened but no sound came out. Don't answer that, Carl snapped. He's trying to trick you. This man is trying to get you fired. I'm trying to protect her, Ethan said quietly. Sarah, you don't have to be afraid anymore. Tell them the truth. If you say one word. Carl took a step toward Sarah, his hand raised. The security officer moved forward, positioning himself between Carl and the counter. Sarah flinched, tears spilling down her cheeks. But then something changed in her expression. Something hardened. Yes, she said, her voice shaking but audible. He makes us work off the clock. Hours and hours. He deletes our time cards. He threatens us if we complain. A murmur rippled through the crowd of customers. She's lying. Carl's voice rose to a shout. She's a terrible employee. She's lazy, she's always complaining. I have bruises from scrubbing floors at midnight. Sarah's voice broke, but she kept talking, the words pouring out like water through a cracked dam. I have a 7-year-old brother who I barely see because I'm here until 1 in the morning and back at 6. My mom could be deported because he threatened to call immigration if I didn't do what he said. You little. Carl lunged toward the counter. The security officer caught him by the arm. Sir, I need you to step back. Get your hands off me. Carl struggled, his face contorted with rage. This is my restaurant. Mine. These people are nothing without me. They're lazy, they're stupid, they need me to tell them what to do. Marcus emerged from the kitchen, still wearing his apron. You threw me against the freezer door when I asked for my legal break time. That's where I got this black eye. Not from walking into a door. Joanna appeared beside him. You steal from us. You threaten my children. One by one, other employees gathered. Elena. Kevin, the young man with acne scars. Even Tommy, who no longer worked there, pushed through the crowd of customers. You locked me in the freezer, Tommy said, his voice shaking with suppressed fury. I could have died. Carl looked around wildly, seeing his control crumbling. They're all lying. Every single one. They're conspiring against me because I hold them to high standards. Ethan stepped forward. I have video footage of you forcing Sarah to scrub floors at 11 p.m. I have recordings of your threats. I have documentation of $47,000 in stolen wages. And I have 17 witnesses ready to testify. He pulled a manila envelope from his jacket and handed it to Carl. You're fired. Effective immediately. You're banned from every property owned by this company. You have 10 minutes to collect your personal belongings and leave. Carl ripped open the envelope with shaking hands. His eyes scanned the termination letter, the legal notice, the list of charges being prepared. You can't do this, he whispered. Richard will. Your brother has been terminated as well. He's currently being investigated for conspiracy to commit fraud and obstruction of justice. The envelope slipped from Carl's fingers, papers scattering across the floor. I built this store, Carl said, his voice hollow. I made it profitable. The numbers were achieved through exploitation and theft. Ethan's voice was hard. You didn't build anything. You broke people. Carl looked at the employees gathered against him. At the customers filming everything. At his empire of cruelty collapsing in real time. And then he snapped. You ungrateful parasites! He screamed at the employees. I gave you jobs. I gave you purpose. You were nothing before me. He grabbed a coffee pot from behind the counter and hurled it. It shattered against the wall, hot coffee spraying everywhere. Customers screamed and backed away. Everyone out, Ethan said calmly. Clear the restaurant. Now. The security officer was already calling the police. Customers rushed for the exits. Employees backed away from Carl, who stood in the middle of the chaos, breathing hard, his eyes wild. You think you've won? Carl laughed, a broken, manic sound. You think firing me changes anything? There are hundreds of managers like me in this industry. Thousands. We keep these places running while people like you sit in your mansions and count your money. You're right, Ethan said quietly. And that's exactly what I'm going to change. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Carl's bravado crumbled. He sank to his knees among the scattered papers and broken glass, his hands over his face. Sarah stood behind the counter, watching him fall apart. She was crying, but for the first time in months, they weren't tears of fear. They were tears of relief. The police escorted Carl out in handcuffs. He tried to run when he heard the sirens, made it as far as the parking lot before the officers caught up. Resisting arrest added to his growing list of charges. The image of him being pushed into the back of a patrol car, still screaming about conspiracy and ungrateful employees, was already going viral on social media. Ethan stood in the now empty restaurant, surrounded by broken glass and scattered papers. Patricia, his lawyer, was on the phone with the Department of Labor. The employees huddled together near the kitchen, shell-shocked and silent. Sir? Sarah's voice was small. What happens now? Ethan turned to face them, these people who'd survived something that should never have happened. They looked terrified, like they were waiting for the other shoe to drop. Now we fix this, Ethan said. All of it. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Janet? I need you to get on the first flight here. Bring the entire HR team. We're doing a complete overhaul of store number 47, and then every single location in the company. Over the next 4 hours, Ethan's team descended on the restaurant like a surgical strike force. HR representatives arrived with tablets and documentation. Accountants began auditing every time card for the past year. IT specialists pulled server data that Richard had tried to delete, unsuccessfully, as it turned out. The backups he'd disabled were just decoys. The real backups were in a secure cloud system he'd never known about. Ethan gathered the employees in the dining area and laid out his plan. First, back pay. Every hour Carl stole from you will be returned with 50% additional compensation for the suffering you endured. Checks will be cut within 72 hours. Joanna gasped. Marcus closed his eyes, his shoulders sagging with relief. Second, I'm hiring an independent firm to audit labor practices at all 73 locations. Any manager found engaging in similar behavior will be terminated immediately and prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Third, Ethan continued, looking directly at Sarah, I'm establishing an employee protection hotline that bypasses regional management entirely. It goes straight to an independent third party, a law firm specializing in workers' rights. They'll investigate every complaint, and their findings come directly to me and the board of directors. Kevin raised his hand tentatively. What about people with immigration issues? If we report something, will we be safe? The hotline is anonymous if you choose. And I'm working with immigration attorneys to establish a legal aid fund for any employee who needs help with documentation. No one should have to choose between safety and deportation. Elena began crying. Tommy put an arm around her shoulders. Fourth, this store is closing for 2 weeks. Paid closure. You'll all receive full wages while we retrain management, update systems, and bring in an organizational psychologist to help everyone process what you've been through. When we reopen, there will be new management, people I've personally vetted. And what about us? Marcus asked quietly. Do we still have jobs? If you want them, yes. But I understand if you don't want to come back here. I'll provide references and 3 months severance to anyone who chooses to leave. No questions asked? Sarah raised her hand. What happens to Carl? And Richard? Patricia stepped forward. Carl is facing criminal charges for wage theft, assault, harassment, and labor violations. The district attorney is building a case. Richard is under investigation for fraud and conspiracy. Both of them are looking at serious jail time. And the regional manager position? Ethan added. That's being restructured. From now on, regional managers will have oversight partners, employees from various stores who serve as advocates. No more unchecked power. He pulled out a folder and handed it to Sarah. I also want to offer you something. A position as a youth employee advocate. You'd work part-time, continuing school, but you'd help develop policies to protect young workers across the company. It comes with a scholarship for college, full tuition, any school you want. Sarah stared at the folder like it might explode. I don't understand. Why me? Because you were brave enough to write that note. Because you documented everything when you thought no one would ever see it. Because you didn't give up. Ethan's voice softened. You saved these people, Sarah. Let me help you build a future. She opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside was a scholarship agreement, a job offer, and a check, her back pay plus compensation. The amount made her gasp. This is more than my mom makes in 6 months. It's what you were owed. What you all were owed. Joanna stood up suddenly. Mr. Price. I need to say something. Of course. She walked to him, her weathered face streaked with tears, and took his hands in hers. You gave me back my dignity. I was afraid every day. Afraid to speak, afraid to breathe. Now I am free. She kissed his hands, and Ethan felt his own eyes burning. You deserve dignity all along, he said hoarsely. I'm sorry it took so long for someone to notice. One by one, the other employees came forward. Marcus shook his hand. Elena hugged him. Tommy thanked him for believing them. Kevin just nodded, unable to speak through his tears. By the time the sun set, The restaurant was empty except for Ethan and Janet. "The board is going to have questions," Janet said carefully. "This is going to cost millions. The audits, the back pay, the legal fees, the settlements. I don't care. The shareholders can accept lower profits for 1/4, or they can sell their stock." Ethan looked at her. "I built this company to be different. Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of that. I got comfortable. Complacent. I trusted systems that I should have been monitoring. That ends now." Janet smiled, a real smile. "Good. Because I've been sending you reports about labor issues for 2 years, and you kept putting them at the bottom of the priority list." Ethan winced. "I know. That's on me. And it won't happen again." His phone buzzed. A news alert. Fast food CEO personally fires abusive manager. Viral video sparks industry conversation. The video from the morning had exploded online. Over 2 million views already. The comments were overwhelming. Stories from other workers in other restaurants facing similar abuse. People demanding change. People sharing their own nightmares. Ethan read through them, each one a dagger to his conscience. "We need to go bigger," he said suddenly. "What?" "This isn't just my company. This is everywhere. We need to create an industry coalition, major chains working together to establish universal worker protections. We need to make what Carl did impossible anywhere, not just here." Janet raised an eyebrow. "You want to convince your competitors to voluntarily increase their labor costs?" "I want to convince them that treating people like human beings is good business. And if they won't listen," Ethan smiled grimly, "then we'll make it a competitive advantage. We'll advertise it. We'll make customers demand it. That's ambitious. That's necessary." Ethan took one last look at store number 47. Tomorrow, contractors would arrive to repaint, repair, rebuild. In 2 weeks, it would reopen, not as a place of fear, but as something new. A place where people could work with dignity. Where they could speak up without terror. Where a note in a nugget box would never be necessary again. He locked the door and walked to his car. There was still so much work to do. But for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt like he was finally doing what he'd set out to do all those years ago. Building something that mattered. 2 weeks later, store number 47 looked transformed. Fresh paint brightened the walls, a warm cream color chosen by the employees themselves. New equipment gleamed in the kitchen. Motivational posters had been replaced with a wall of voices, where staff could anonymously post suggestions, concerns, or just thoughts about their day. A comfortable break room with actual furniture, a microwave, and a coffee maker had been installed where a storage closet used to be. But the real transformation wasn't visible. It was in the way employees smiled. The way they made eye contact. The way they moved through the space without fear. Ethan stood in the parking lot at 9 a.m. on reopening day, watching a line of customers stretch around the building. News coverage of the confrontation had brought curiosity seekers, but also genuine supporters, people who wanted to support a business trying to do things right. Sarah emerged from the restaurant, wearing a crisp new uniform with a special badge, Youth Advocate. She'd gained weight in the past 2 weeks, actual healthy weight from regular meals and reduced stress. The dark circles under her eyes had faded. "We're ready," she said. "The new manager just gave us a pep talk. It was actually nice. Weird but nice." The new manager was Patricia's sister, Maria, a 20-year veteran of the food service industry with spotless references and a philosophy centered on respect and clear communication. She'd spent the past week training with the staff, learning their names, their stories, their ideas for improvement. "How are you feeling?" Ethan asked. Sarah smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Nervous. Excited. My mom cried this morning when she saw my scholarship letter. She kept saying, 'Mija, you did it, you saved us.'" Her voice caught. "But I didn't save us. You did. We did it together. You were brave first." A car pulled up and Ioana stepped out with her 2 children, a boy about 10 and a girl around 7. She'd brought them to see the reopening, to show them where their mother worked now. The immigration attorney Ethan had hired was already making progress on her visa renewal. For the first time in years, Joanna walked without looking over her shoulder. Marcus arrived next, followed by Elena and Tommy. Even employees who'd chosen to take the severance and leave had shown up to support the reopening. Kevin was starting at a community college next month, using his severance to pay for classes. But he'd promised to visit. At 10 a.m. sharp, Maria unlocked the doors. The first customer was an elderly woman who'd been coming to store number 47 for years. She'd watched the viral video and read the news stories. She walked straight to the counter where Sarah stood waiting. "I'd like a number 3, please," she said. Then, quieter. "And I'd like to say I'm proud of you, young lady. What you did took courage." Sarah's eyes glistened. "Thank you. That means a lot." The morning rush was controlled chaos, but happy chaos. Maria moved through the kitchen offering help, not criticism. When someone made a mistake, she showed them the correct way patiently, without raising her voice. Employees actually laughed while they worked. Around noon, Ethan gathered everyone for a brief meeting in the dining area. Customers had thinned out, leaving them a moment to breathe. "I want to thank all of you," Ethan began. "Not just for coming back, but for having the courage to speak up. Because of you, we've already made changes at 43 other locations. We've fired 6 managers for violations. We've returned over $200,000 in stolen wages to workers across the company." He paused, making eye contact with each person. "But more importantly, you've started a conversation. Other companies are reaching out, asking how we're implementing these changes. Workers at other chains are demanding better treatment. You've created a ripple effect that's going to help people you'll never meet." Marcus spoke up. "What happened to Carl? And Richard?" "Carl pled guilty to multiple labor violations to avoid jail time. He's been sentenced to 500 hours of community service, 5 years probation, and he's permanently banned from any management position in the food service industry. He's also paying restitution. Richard is facing fraud charges. His trial is in 3 months. The evidence is overwhelming." Elena raised her hand. "And what about the other stores? How do we know this won't happen again somewhere else?" It was the question Ethan had been preparing for. "You can't know for certain," he admitted. "But here's what we're doing. Every store now has quarterly anonymous surveys that go directly to independent reviewers. Every region has employee advocates with direct access to me. We've tripled our HR staff and given them real power to investigate and act. And most importantly, I'm spending 1 day each month visiting random stores, unannounced, talking to employees privately." He pulled out a small card and held it up. "Everyone in the company is getting these. It has the employee hotline, the advocacy program number, and my personal email. If something is wrong, you have multiple ways to report it safely." Sarah took one of the cards, running her fingers over the embossed numbers. "My mom wants to meet you. To say thank you? I'd like that." As the meeting broke up and employees returned to their stations, Ethan noticed a young girl, maybe 16, filling out an application at one of the tables. She looked nervous, her pen hovering over the paper. He walked over. "First job?" She jumped. "Oh. Yes, sir. I've never. I'm nervous because I heard stories about working in fast food being really hard and—" She stopped, eyes widening. "Wait, aren't you the owner? From the video?" "I am." "Is it true? What you said about protecting employees and fair wages and everything?" "Every word." She bit her lip. "My friend works at a burger place across town. Her manager makes her stay late without pay all the time. She's too scared to report it. I told her about your video, but she doesn't think it'll help." Ethan pulled out his business card and wrote a number on the back. "This is our worker advocacy hotline. It's not just for my employees. We help anyone in the food service industry. Have your friend call. We'll connect her with resources and legal help if she needs it." The girl took the card like it was made of gold. "Really? You'd help someone who doesn't even work for you? Really?" No one should have to work in fear. She clutched the application to her chest. Then I definitely want to work here. As the afternoon wore on, Ethan stood back and watched his team work. Real teamwork, not the fear-based compliance Carl had enforced. People helping each other. Smiling. Taking pride in their work because they were treated with pride. Sarah took her break and sat with her mother, who'd come to see the reopening. The older woman held her daughter's hand, speaking rapidly in Spanish, tears streaming down her face. Sarah translated for Ethan. She says she prayed every night for someone to help us. She says you're an answer to prayer. Ethan felt the weight of that, the responsibility, and the honor of it. Tell her I'm just someone who finally started paying attention. The real heroes are the people who survived and still had the courage to hope for something better. As the sun began to set, Ethan prepared to leave. The store was running smoothly. Maria had everything under control. The employees were laughing in the break room, making plans to hang out after work, something they'd never felt safe doing under Carl's regime. Sarah walked him to his car. What happens next? She asked. For you, I mean? Next, I visit store number 23. Then store number 61. I'm going to every location personally. I'm going to make sure what happened here never happens again. That's a lot of stores. It's a lot of people who deserve better. Sarah hugged him suddenly, fiercely. Thank you for seeing my note. Thank you for caring. Ethan hugged her back. Thank you for being brave enough to write it. He drove away as the evening rush began, watching store number 47 in his rearview mirror, a beacon of light in the growing darkness, full of people who were finally safe. The note in the nugget box had changed everything. And Ethan was just getting started. The end.